Ladies and gentlemen, we are live again. I have a special guest joining us again, Ben Stanhope, and we're going to be doing a presentation. So for those who are tuning in, send your super chats. We'll get them during Q&A after, but you're going to have a blast enjoying this presentation because he debunks fully the Creation Museum. With that being said, welcome back, Ben. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. I love this show. It's good to be back.
I love it having you on the show, and it's always a pleasure. Ben, you've come on quite a few times, and every time you have a great presentation. People can follow step by step what you're saying. Last time we were talking about like Egyptian influence on Israelites and how they had rings and signal. What are they called?
Sigils.
Sigils. I was saying signals. I don't know why, but that reflected like the lotus flower and Horus and Egyptian iconography and all this stuff in Israelites' political and writings and things like that. And you're like, what the heck is going on here? Well, today, I think we're going to take some jabs at some low-hanging fruit, but you've exhaustively like really debunked this stuff. Also, he has the book, and this is the book we're actually presenting technically, at least giving you like sound bites. Tell us about this book real quick, and then we'll get into your presentation.
The title of the book, Misinterpreting Genesis, How the Creation Museum Misunderstands the Ancient Near Eastern Context of the Bible. And the idea behind this book is, you know, there have been tons of critiques of the Creation Museum scientifically and all the ridiculous claims that they make that the Earth is 6,000 years old and man coexisted with dinosaurs. And I wanted to write a book entirely on the subject of how they misinterpret the Bible itself, how its answers in Genesis versus the Bible, and how their view of inerrancy and inspiration forces them to misunderstand the Bible.
I saw you.
And yeah, I was able to get. I visited the museum. I visited the Ark Encounter, and I was able to get a full book's worth of content, just critiquing them on this.
Everybody, get a copy. Don't miss out. If you really want to see some bloody mess, slaughterhouse of information here, since we're being biblical, the sacrifice of ridiculousness on an altar. So, all right, Ben, look, we're going to drop some serious bombs today. Everything is going to be gory and warlike in the language I'm going to use today during this interview. And anyone who has questions, super chat them. We will get them during Q&A. You're going to be giving a graphical presentation. And so I will not be interrupting you unless I have to, like, hey, audio's not right or video's not show, or whatever might be happening. And once we're done, we'll take questions.
All right. So I've decided to title this the Creation Museum versus the Bible. And basically, I'm going to be going over some of the content in the book. This is the book. It's entitled Misinterpreting Genesis, How the Creation Museum Misunderstands the Ancient Near Eastern Context of the Bible. And the presentation I'm going to be giving is in two parts. Part one is entitled, Enter the Museum Lobby. There are dinosaurs in your Bible. So the Creation Museum, especially when you walk into the very front of it, has all these displays that claim that there are dinosaurs that show up in the Bible, that, you know, ancient people, they painted and had myths about dragons, so that indicates that they must have lived alongside dinosaurs within 6,000 years ago. So topic one is entitled Dragon Legends Prove Man Lived with Dinosaurs. They make a lot of claims in this regard. Topic two, Leviathan was probably a plesiosaur. This is the claim that they make. They claim that Behemoth in the book of Job was probably something like a brachiosaurus. And I've entitled this topic, A Brachiosaurus in Job, How Young Earthers Seriously Misunderstood Behemoth's Penis. So we're going to talk all about Behemoth's penis today.
I feel like you should at least be unmuted to laugh when it's time to like, ha ha, what?
Number 4, Ken Ham found unicorns in the Bible to prove that Jesus died for you. And then number 5, we're going to look at pterodactyls in the book of Isaiah, see if they're really there. Was Isaiah just seeing pterodactyls, you know, in the late Iron Age in the Judean desert, just hanging out? And then part 2, Answers in Genesis versus the Bible, I want to get into some of the ways that I think that the Creation Museum has misunderstood the Bible in its original context. And I want to discuss notions like how the doctrine of inerrancy, particularly their doctrine of inerrancy, this radical view that they have that you can extract all this scientific information from biblical texts. I think that it prevents them from understanding the Bible. It gets in the way of their understanding of the Bible. Number 7, the flat earth in the Bible. I want to discuss that for a little bit. 8, the non-scientific reason for the 7-day creation myth. I don't think that they've understood the 7 days of Genesis correctly. And then number 9, I want to discuss ancient Israelite religion and animal death before the fall. I do not believe that ancient Northwest Semitic Judahites believed in this notion that when God created humanity, all the animals were vegetarian, humanity didn't slaughter any animals. I think they've radically misunderstood modern scholarship on this. So part 1, enter the museum lobby. There are dinosaurs in your Bible. So this is a picture that I took of a display in the museum. It's still in there. It's called the Utah Black Dragon Canyon pictograph. And yeah, this is the pictograph. This guy in this image is, I think, Buddy Davis from the Creation Museum. He went to go see it, and they took these pictures. And they think that this thing depicts a freaking pterosaur. That, you know, you had Native Americans living in Utah at the time. They lived alongside these pterodactyls flying in the sky, and they painted one. And look at this. This is some of the evidence that human beings lived alongside dinosaurs only, you know, within 6,000 years ago. And creationists have been making this claim so long, and it's just so common in their literature. It's one of the most common young earth creationists apologetics that there were 3 experts, several material scientists, and then a rock art expert, Jean-Louis Lekellic, Paul Bonn, and Marvin Rowe, decided to do a study of this pictograph published in the journal Antiquity. This was done in 2015. And they used several methods to analyze this red ochre pigment pictograph that these Native American culture that they painted on the side of this canyon. One is called X-ray fluorescence, which is a technique that I trained in during my graduate degree. And the idea behind X-ray fluorescence is you're shooting, you have this gun and it has this little laser point, and you shoot X-rays at a sample. It kicks out electrons in that sample, and then the computer reads back what elements are composing that sample, because every element in the periodic table has different electron concatenations. So you can get back information about how much of a particular element is within a sample and what elements are in the sample. And so, you know, they targeted different points within this image that, you know, within this pterosaur. And they showed that the iron in the red ochre pigment isn't equally distributed, which indicates that this is multiple images that have been blurred together. And then they used a second technique called de-stretch. And de-stretch, again, it's a technique that's used in my field of understanding written artifacts, particularly manuscripts. I'll show you that in a second. But the idea behind de-stretch is it's basically a Photoshop algorithm where you put a digital picture through this algorithm, and it works with the histogram of the image. So like every single pixel, whether it's closer to a basic color like blue, red, or green, the one that it's most adjacent to, the algorithm will force that pixel to become that basic color. So it just makes the image, like, you know, ridiculously more obvious, like what's going on in the image. Yeah, it's a way of basically muting background noise and bringing out particular colors within the image. And I'll give you some examples. Like in manuscript research, this is used all the time. I knew a guy, Ivan, that worked at the Hamburg University manuscripts lab, he would just do this within Photoshop software, where you can take pictures of manuscripts, for example, under different lighting conditions. You can use the program to discover, look, there's been an erasure of an illustration within this image that we can see. Here's another example of one. So it's super cool technology. This technology has been used to discover lost texts from the ancient world that have been erased, and then the manuscripts are written over. Here's another example of what you can do with it. And so, yeah, these scientists, they put this image that's up in the Creation Museum being used right now as evidence. They put it through D-Stretch, and this is what they got back.
Oh.
And these are classic images, you know, within the Native American culture. You see them images very similar to this all over the place within their other artwork. And guess what? The museum knows about this. They don't care. Bodie Hodge, during the COVID lockdowns, he did a tour of the museum that I watched live, and he went up to this image and he acknowledged that this study had been published, and he said that he didn't believe in it. He thought that his understanding of the study is he thinks that these scientists just edit it in Photoshop, basically. So yeah, I'll read. This is an article that he wrote. The new images that are formed by their analysis through computer technology similar to Photoshop are completely ridiculous looking. So we are skeptical. We are not convinced that the argument against the pterosaur interpretation is accurate. Those arguing against the pterosaur interpretation have a vested interest. So they think that because these guys are like, they're secularists, that they just like, yeah, they just made this up. I don't think Bodie Hodge understands how X-ray fluorescence works at all. Like, there's no iron in these little parts between the image. It's not one image. And then, yeah. So this is just like an example of the sort of stuff that you see when you go to the Creation Museum. Absolutely beautiful. Here's another example. This is from their new Answers book, which is like the flagship book series in the museum, and Answers in Genesis. The Agawa rock pictographs. These are off the side of Lake Superior in Canada that a Native American tribe painted. This dragon with back spines is reminiscent to a Kentrosaurus or a Margosaurus, but possibly a Lambeosaurus, which is like a duck-billed dinosaur near Lake Superior in Canada. Yeah, so this is what they think this thing looks like, with, you know, its bull horns and cat-looking ears. And again, this is evidence to them that mankind lived alongside dinosaurs. And yeah, when you Google this thing, just like, this is a famous like place in Canada you can go visit. There's like signs up that explain it. First page of Google, you find out, oh, it's a creature called underwater panther within Native American cosmology and mythology. He's this god that lives in Lake Superior, and he causes storms. And in Native American languages, it means like the wildcat, the great underwater wildcat. It's basically a lynx-like creature. It's combined with the features of a fish. That's why it's got back spines. It's not a freaking dragon or dinosaur. And these are some images of the thing that I've collected from just looking through museum archives, some line drawings. There's no dinosaur in existence that has like bull horns like this, or that has, you know, these cat-like ears that you see in some of these depictions. And then here's another image that I took in the museum, pretty close to the last one that I mentioned, the Narmer palette. And I've included this line detail so you can see this thing, because it's like, it's not obvious in the museum. But again, you have like Bodie Hodge was presenting this. I've seen it published all over the place in young earth literature. They think that the ancient Egyptians saw brontosauruses or brachiosauruses, and they depicted them. This is evidence that mankind lived alongside dinosaurs. The caption reads, let's see. The Narmer palette contains some of the earliest hieroglyphs ever found, as well as two long-necked creatures that resemble sauropod dinosaurs. And yeah, I just want to point out, these are obviously feline features if you look at it closely. Most people in the museum don't, you know, they're not going to be able to look at it closely enough probably to tell what's going on here. But yeah, first page of Google, you find out that there's this creature in Egyptian mythology it's the idea of a serpent leopard. It's a leopard with a long neck like a serpent. And I went and looked up some of these in museum archives online, provided these line drawings, and you can see this it just doesn't look like a dinosaur or brachiosaur or anything. And I think this is the last example of like a dinosaur display that I'll give you in this presentation. But you can see how ridiculous this is getting, how none of these can be vetted past like the first page of a Google search or Wikipedia. But Answers in Genesis' famous Aboriginal painting of a plesiosaur. You see this all over the place within young earth literature. It was donated to Answers in Genesis by a missionary in the 90s. And the claim is that it depicts a living plesiosaur by the Australian Kuku-Yalanji tribe, who had no previous knowledge of dinosaurs. They published articles about this. Bodie Hodges presented it. And if you can go ahead and play the Brian Osborne video, this is a presentation done in 2018, which will be important in a second.
All right, I'm going to play right now.
Thanks for joining us in Legacy Hall to hear from one of our excellent speakers, Brian Osborne. He's since joined Answers in Genesis as our curriculum specialist and a very popular speaker.
Here's a fun one to end on as far as this subject goes. This is a creature given to us by the Aboriginal people, and they called this creature Yaru. And they say Yaru was a real creature, it was a real menace. And in this picture, they're showing us the time that Yaru ate one of their friends. And they're trying to get their friend back or get revenge or something like that. And Yaru looks a whole lot what we call a plesiosaur.
Yeah, so again, this was 2018 when this video was posted. I don't exactly know the date that he presented that presentation, but Answers in Genesis put it up on YouTube, July 11th, 2018. And there was an article published a year before by paleontologist, Philip Sinter, where he did some sleuthing. He went looking for this image and he realized it was pulled. This image of a plesiosaur was traced from a 1960s children's picture book of dinosaurs. And I've done this digitally. I've pulled up like a digital document of this 1960s book. By the way, the dinosaurs in it look absolutely ridiculous. It looks like old black and white TV dinosaurs. They're anatomically incorrect. This image of a plesiosaur is incorrect anatomical features that were thought at the time that have now been debunked. But
my gosh.
Yeah, so I guess the missionary that got this, the Aboriginal kid or whoever, like he had a picture. Yeah, it's literally the same size. It's traced. It's a traced image. And I guess since they don't listen to criticism or Google themselves or anything, like they're still presenting this claim as if it's evidence. Back when I was in seminary, this was years and years ago, like 2017 or something. The first time I took a trip to the Creation Museum, I was learning Hebrew at the time. And even then, like I kept coming across like all these ridiculous things in the museum that were just wrong. I ended up writing a blog post that went viral at the time, and the museum took down their 10 Commandments and put up blank 10 Commandments because they couldn't figure out the Hebrew. But this is an older picture. This is an older picture of the 10 Commandments that they used to have before I embarrassed them into taking them down. All right, so they've written these 10 Commandments in block script, the Ashuri block script, which was like during the Aramaic period. So like that's really anachronistic. There's vowel points that weren't invented until the Masoretes in the Middle Ages that they've put in here. The person who wrote who made these and like, you know, Ken Ham, I assume, looked at them and everybody approved them at the Creation Museum. They didn't realize that like the letters are wrong. Like some of the letters are switched from other ones. It's very obvious that the person that made this didn't know the Hebrew alphabet. They've put divisions in the words that spell out funny things like consonantally. So it's just a total mess, man. I'm surprised that they have the Hebrew right side up.
That's where I got to play the video, right? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. So I don't know if you.
It's not going to play. I mean, like, you're not going to hear it, but you can tell me when to pause.
Yeah.
and I will like pause it so everybody can see the truth of the museum that we're talking about. Hallelujah.
They have a bunch of scrolls in the museum, which I think some of this stock footage probably comes from. But like, these are videos from their website. When I was doing research in my book, I kept realizing like, oh my God, like every time they show a Hebrew scroll, it's upside down. Like, yeah, this one's upside down. It's like live video.
I should do this right here.
That scroll is upside down. That Hebrew's upside down. You keep going on. Yeah, so like a background stock image, it's upside down. They didn't know right side up when looking at a Hebrew Bible. Upside down.
Oh my.
That's a different video. And Ken Ham is in some of these videos, so I assume that he saw the video. And the man's running like $200 million worth of museums about the Hebrew Bible, and he didn't know at the time, you know, I'm guessing what was right side up when holding a Bible. So yeah, upside down text again.
Wow.
And yeah, that's good.
Let me get you back up here. All right.
Let's see. Yeah, and then we'll watch the sloth video, and then I'll move on to part 2, and we'll talk a little bit about the museum, like how I think it contradicts the Bible itself. This is, you think you might know how this video is going to end, but you do not. Trust me.
Here we go. Buckle up, everybody. You're in for a ride.
Hey, Brian here with Leanne, the senior zoo manager from the Ark Encounter, for the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum here at Answers in Genesis. And we're hanging out with a sloth.
That's one of the structures they use to protect themselves in the wild. So if a jaguar is chasing them and they happen to be over a river or lake or something like that, they will actually just fall out of the tree into the water. And they can swim really fast, and they can actually hold their breath for up to 22 minutes. So once again, that slow metabolism can kind of come in handy when you're trying to get away from a jaguar.
22 minutes. Wow.
Yes.
Well, that's awesome. We were talking beforehand. Yes, the sloth, this one is fast for a sloth, but he's still slow. Why? Because sloths, by definition, are slow. That's how they are made to operate. And it shouldn't surprise us that they move slowly. And in today's lessons, we see something that should not surprise us as well, and that is Christians are persecuted. Sloths move slow, well, Christians are persecuted. That kind of happens because of who we are. Jesus even warned the disciples that, you know what? Just as I've been persecuted, you will be persecuted as well.
What the heck was that? Dude, what just happened?
There's $120 million like Ark Encounter theme park in the background as he's talking about his persecution next to his exotic like petting zoo. That guy, Brian Osborne, is the guy that does that did the homeschooling curriculum for Answers in Genesis. So he's the guy that was presenting the plesiosaur and stuff. Like, yeah, this is from their homeschooling lessons. I had to put that in there because I know, like, from your background, like,
oh yeah,
just like mine, like we remember those hard transitions pretty well, you know, into Christian persecution, American Christian persecution. But yeah, I'll go ahead and move on to the next section or next topic. Leviathan may be a Leopleurodon or a plesiosaur, as is often claimed. This in the side here. I've got images from the museum that show him as a mosasaur. It looks like it's eaten like a shark or a dolphin or something, and they quote the book of Job. So Ken Ham states in the New Answers book, Job 41 describes a great animal that lived in the sea, Leviathan. This dragon may have been something like the 82-foot Leopleurodon. So again, this is one of the most popular apologetics that you find in young Earth Christianity. It's one that I remember being taught a ton growing up. And the text in Job 41 that describes this creature, it's basically, it's a description of this great aquatic dragon. And I'll read a section from it real quick. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook? Around his teeth is terror. His back is made up of rows of shields, shut up closely as with a seal. Out of his mouth go flaming torches, sparks of fire leap forth. So the text says multiple times that Leviathan is a fire-breathing dragon. And young Earth creationists like take this one to the chin, and they literally like believe that some dinosaurs could breathe fire, literally. And these images that you're seeing on screen, one of them at the top is from Duane Gish's classic book, Dinosaurs by Design, that's sold, in the gift shop at the Creation Museum. It's like one of those classic books in young Earth creationism. I grew up, I had a copy of this book. And then, these images underneath are images from their homeschool curriculum showing dinosaurs fire breathing. The reason why they infer that land dinosaurs could fire breathe like some aquatic ones is because, again, they believe mankind lived alongside them, and you have these ancient legends about fire breathing dragons. So like they believe, God gave them that ability. So I've been at this for a while. I have a degree in Christian worldview and apologetics, which is kind of like embarrassing to me at this point. It's from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. And then I have a MA from a German university in manuscript studies. I studied Semitic manuscripts and seals. So I've been at this for a while, and Leviathan, he's not like a dinosaur. He's a Northwest Semitic chaos god. So the way that we know this is that we have recovered ancient Baal literature, which also contains Leviathan. In that language, which is very similar to Hebrew, he's called Lotan or Litanu. And one parallel between the Bible and the Ugaritic texts, the Baal texts, is in Psalm 74, which mentions Leviathan. It says in Hebrew, Leviathan, you crushed the heads, plural, a Leviathan, singular. So Leviathan was a hydra. He had multiple heads in this text, in the Bible. In the Ugaritic text, in the Baal cycle, it just straight up says that Lotan has 7 heads, which, we can infer that Leviathan probably had 7 heads as well in the Bible. That's what's being assumed. And I'll go ahead and read 2 parallel passages between the Ugaritic texts and Isaiah 27, verse 1. In the first book, so these are the religious texts of Ugarit, of the Ugaritic texts. It reads, you smote Litanu, the fleeing serpent, annihilated the twisting serpent, the dominant one who has 7 heads. So those 2 titles, the fleeing serpent, the twisting serpent. In Isaiah 27:1, it reads, in that day Yahweh will punish with his greatly fierce and mighty sword Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent. And he will slay the dragon, the Tananine in Hebrew, that is in the sea. So in Hebrew and Ugaritic, these 2 titles, fleeing serpent, twisting serpent, they're identical, letter for letter, same titles.
But the Bible is true
text,
and not...
In the Ugaritic text, he's a god. He's a god that Baal fights in order to sustain the created order. And he personifies chaos. And that's exactly how he's used everywhere in the Bible. If you think he's a freaking marine dinosaur, like, you've totally misunderstood the text. You've totally cheapened its value and its theology. And it leads to all sorts of ridiculous contradictions. Like in Psalm 74, if people don't know, most of your subscribers will know this. In the Babylonian creation myth, Marduk slays a dragon named Tiamat and then uses her body parts to create the universe. Psalm 74, it's the exact same thing. And the biblical authors are like straightforward about this. I mean, the context of that psalm is Babylon, where God slays Leviathan and creates the world out of him. That would contradict Genesis 1 if it were true. They're clearly using this as a metaphor, as like epic mythology. This is a tradition, an ancient Israelite tradition about the creation of the heavens and the earth, that it's made from a dragon that was parallel to Mesopotamia. So yeah, you can't take it literally in every sense. Let's see. Yeah, so it contradicts Genesis 1. And then we have all these references in the book of Job and the Psalms that have God continually subduing this dragon Leviathan in order to sustain creation. In Isaiah 27:1, it says that God will kill Leviathan to bring about the eschaton, which is like, what? Why would God kill a freaking dinosaur, a plesiosaur, in order to bring about the end of the world? It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, he's a god. He's a fire-breathing, seven-headed god. There are no seven-headed plesiosaurs or mosasaurs in the fossil record. Number 3, a brachiosaurus in Job. How young earthers seriously misunderstood Behemoth's penis. Yeah, this is, I couldn't play the video clip because you'll get copyright struck, but this is like a conference by Answers to Genesis where they're like singing a song with a bunch of kids. It says, Behemoth is a dinosaur is he. He eateth grass as an ox. His tail's like a cedar tree. His bones are strong as bars of iron. He's chief in the ways of God. Could Behemoth be a dinosaur, a mighty sauropod? And the kids are having a great time just dancing and singing to this. So yeah, in the text, again, this is another mythic creature who is mentioned alongside Leviathan. And in the text, it says, he makes his tail stiff like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. Depending on the translation, it might say he sways his tail like a cedar. The Hebrew is difficult for the verb. It has a multitude of possible meanings. This is the ESV. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar, which is very interesting. And because there's no other creature on earth that's living that has a tail like a cedar, they assume, well, this must be a freaking brontosaurus. And Job saw, he lived alongside sauropods. And I've done extensive study on this passage, and no, Behemoth isn't a dinosaur. He's a Northwest Semitic chaos god like Leviathan. In the couplet parallelism of this poem, the word for tail is in parallel with the word for thighs. So going back real quick, he makes his tail stiff like a cedar. Second line that repeats the same idea. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. That Aramaic, that word thighs is Aramaic. It's a loan word, pachad, in Hebrew. In the Syriac Targumim and Aramaic translations of Leviticus 21:20 and in rabbinic texts, the word pachad specifically designates the testicles. This is why in ancient translations and Jewish translations, like in the Latin Vulgate, you get the phrase testiculorum, is how this word thighs is translated. And it's in couplet parallelism with tail. So tons of modern academic translators, some of the best in the world, that have worked on this passage, like Edward Greenstein. He's written a Yale commentary on this passage, on the whole book of Job. I think his is the best one that exists in English. You have Robert Alter, he's the Hebrew guy at Berkeley, Marvin Pope, Stephen Mitchell, David Burnett, Scott C. Jones. They all agree and translate Behemoth's tail as his penis. So yeah, that's a problem. First off, dinosaurs didn't have external penises. At least that's what I'm told. I assume that's the case. I don't see crocodiles with penises explicitly. We also have the problem that the word behemoth, it's based off a Hebrew word behema, it usually means cattle. It's the idea of like a beast-like creature, a beast of the field, which tends to assume that he's like the king of the beasts of the field. Most likely he's like a bovine creature, because that's what the word usually designates. Yeah. Point number 4, he's parallel with Leviathan, so we shouldn't assume that this is a literal animal. We should assume that it's a mythical animal. And then I just want to point out, in the Baal cycle, we also see when we have Lotan or Latanu, when he's mentioned alongside this bovine god called Arshu, KTU 1:6, and the sea are Arshu and the dragon. May Kothar Wahasis drive them away. May Kothar Wahasis cut them off. Yeah, so I think Behemoth in the Bible, he's like this divine bull figure, like we see, for example, in like Sumerian literature. He's something like that. I don't think it's a freaking dinosaur. There's nothing in the passage that would allude to the idea that he's reptilian, for example. Number 4 of 9. That Time Kinham and a medical doctor found unicorns in the Bible to show that Jesus died for you. So again, we're staying on this theme of the answers Answers in Genesis, the Creation Museum, they are constantly looking for all these creatures, these extinct animals that must have lived alongside humanity in the ancient Near East. Because, again, they don't care about geography of where animals live because they think every animal that exists dispersed from the ark across the whole globe. So, so kangaroos used to exist in the ancient Near East, and you know, just everything, anything goes. And so they in the King James Bible, if you're unaware, there are unicorns mentioned. This is the old King James, the old the thou King James. Deuteronomy 33, his glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of unicorns. Psalm 92, but my horn shalt thou exalt like the horn of an unicorn. I shall be anointed with fresh oil. You get passages like this in the old King James Version. And so, you know, they ask the question, what could these unicorns be? What could they be? Well, there was an animal that used to exist that was super strong. It was kind of ox-like and it had one horn. It's called an elasmotherium. In secular science, we believe that it died out during the Pleistocene, the Ice Age. So Kinham states, we've written articles and even a book chapter defending that I should read this in like an Australian accent, defending that the biblical unicorn and pointing out that it could very well have been an elasmotherium. Yeah, that's what he thinks is in here. And then Elizabeth Mitchell, I think she's like a medical doctor or something that wrote all these articles and made a video for them. There's ample support for the possibility that the creature in view here really did have just one horn. All right, I read a little bit of Hebrew. If you've been to if you've taken a first semester Hebrew class, you would know, you'd be able to follow this. In Deuteronomy 33:17, we had this phrase, Karene Ra'im. The word Ra'im is what's being translated as unicorn. And we have a plural Sarah Yod construct here. So basically, this is a singular Ra'im, a singular animal, and it has multiple horns in Hebrew. So this claim that she makes that it really did just have one horn, it's just wrong. You can prove it grammatically, and they can't read Hebrew, so none of them have caught this ever. So yeah, pretty much every single modern translation knows this thing's a wild ox. That's how they translate. It's a wild ox. Whenever you see it mentioned in poetry, it's always paralleled with like a bull or bullock or a calf. So yeah, they disagree with the entirety of modern translations and come up with this ridiculous elasmotherium interpretation. And I'll give you one more example, and then we'll move on to part 2. I've got four topics there that I wanted to go over. Kinham believes that there are that there are pterodactyls in the book of Isaiah, or that there might be. That's how they always speak. They use this suggestive language. Could this be? There is mention of a flying serpent in the Bible, the fiery flying serpent of Isaiah 30, verse 6. This could be a reference to the pterodactyls, which are popularly thought of as flying dinosaurs, such as the Pteranodon rhamphorhynchus or Orthniacaris. Yeah, there's displays in the Creation Museum that allude to this. This is a display. It's called Cowboys and Dragons, and it's about this hoax newspaper article that I did research on, found out it was a hoax, and they claim that from this old newspaper article that cowboys saw a living pterosaur, a Quetzalcoatlus pterosaur in the 1890s in Arizona. But I don't want to go over that. Let's just look at the biblical passage real quick. The one that he brought up, Isaiah chapter 30, verse 6. An oracle upon the beasts of the Negev, in the land of trouble and suffering, in the domain of the lioness and lion, the viper and flying serpent, Seraph Meophaith in Hebrew. They will carry their riches on the shoulders of young donkeys, and upon the humps of camels take their treasures to people that won't profit them. All right, so you have a description of animals that exist in the desert. They're pretty mundane. A lion, a viper, and then a flying serpent. What the heck is that? And you and I both know from my last presentation on Hebrew seals that we know exactly what it is because it's all over the place in ancient Israelite art of this period, exactly around the time that Isaiah was writing. we have all these seal objects. This is Paleo-Hebrew. These are Hebrew artifacts. They look Egyptian, but they are indeed Hebrew. And we see cobras over and over again in Egyptian and in Hebrew art being depicted with wings. The idea was mythologically among the Egyptians originally, they had this mythology that because the cobra spreads its hood like wings, that they would exaggerate them as they would exaggerate the cobra hood as literal wings within their art. And they had all sorts of mythological associations for reasons why they did this, because they believed it was a sacred divine creature. But yeah, within the late Iron Age Judah, basically cobra, one of the ways you could refer to a cobra, like a nickname for the cobra, was a winged serpent, because it spreads its hood. That's all it is. That's why in the passage you have it parallel with a viper. Like, it's just a common snake to them. So this is completely just utterly stupid. All right, part 2, answers in Genesis versus the Bible. So we have here very lovely pictures. This is the Ark encounter, the no gay zone here. Of he has a rainbow. They're taking back the rainbow in the name of Christ. When you go inside, I went to the Ark encounter. It was very boring, actually. It's just like a bunch of dinosaurs in cages. We have this image in the lower corner of. This is from the Creation Museum proper, and it's a room you go into, and it depicts like the side of a church, and it's being destroyed, devastated by a wrecking ball that says millions of years. Fantastic stuff going on at the Creation Museum. Highly recommended. So the sixth thing that I wanted to discuss, I don't have an issue with the doctrine of inerrancy. There are lots of Christians that have a very sophisticated and adult view of inerrancy that is conducive to contextual Bible study. But Answers in Genesis's view of inerrancy is just ridiculous. I think they try to extract all this crazy scientific data from the Bible that it was never intended by its authors to have anything to do with. And I think that their view of inerrancy, their high view of Scripture, actually ends up making them incapable of understanding the Bible in just so many contexts. And I'll give you, an easy, quick example, several of them. Kidneys in the Bible. So if you can read Hebrew, or if you just read the footnotes in your Bible, anytime that the Old Testament mentions the mind, that term in Hebrew is actually the kidneys, usually either the kidneys or the heart. So ancient Mesopotamians, ancient Jews, ancient Egyptians had no freaking idea what the brain did. The Egyptians, when they would mummify someone, they would just take it out and burn it and get rid of it. And then they would take other more important organs and preserve them in canopic jars, because they're going to need those organs in the afterlife. So like, here's some text in the Bible. I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the kidneys, the kleot in Hebrew, to give every man according to his deeds. Psalm 26. Examine me, O Lord, and prove me. Try my kidneys and my heart. I think that's David praying. My kidneys shall rejoice when your lips speak what is right. And you can parallel these to, for example, Egyptian texts. Homage to thee, O my heart. Homage to you, O my kidneys. This is from the Book of the Dead. We have an Egyptian papyrus that speaks of the discerner of hearts, the searchers of kidneys is thy name. You can see, the ancient Hebrews thought of the kidneys in basically the same way. And like, if the Creation Museum were to be consistent, you would expect them to like be outside of like medical centers or people getting kidney transplants or kidneys removed and be like protesting like it's abortion or something. Like, that's the seed of the soul. Like, you can't destroy the seed of the soul and like put it into another person. You're playing God or something. Like, they should be all for teaching the controversy about kidneys in the sciences and in classrooms and so forth. And maybe opposed to people having their kidneys removed if it gets infected. Another example would be evil eye magic, one of my favorite topics. If you can read Greek, if you can read Hebrew, or just your Bible footnotes, just straight up, the Bible talks about the evil eye not all the time, but pretty regularly. It'll reference it. So Mark 7, verses 21 through 22. Out of the heart of men proceed evil thoughts, and an evil eye, the ophthalmos poneros in Greek. It's literally, eyes evil, or eye evil. Matthew 20, verse 15. Am I allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? This is, I think, Jesus giving a parable. Or is your eye evil? Ophthalmos poneros again. And then we also have it in Hebrew. Do not eat the bread of an evil-eyed one. Eira ayin. Evil eye in Hebrew. That's literally what it means. So there's, entire books and studies written on this phenomenon of the Bible. So I think Answers in Genesis, if they were consistent with their view that, whenever the Bible touches on science, God doesn't lie. So it has to be accurate. Whenever the Bible touches on science, they need to be consistent and go to like vision centers and be protesting them and like trying to teach in schools that evil eye magic is real, and like they should be pro evil eye amulets. Like people were like, that's the biblical worldview, is you need your evil eye amulets, man. You need your seal ring to protect you, and it's got a Uraeus serpent god on it. And this is like the other example. We've given a whole presentation in the past, a very like pretty thorough one, on how the earth it's a flat earth worldview within the biblical world. It's the Egyptians believed that the earth was flat. The Mesopotamians did. Every culture surrounding them believed that the earth was flat, that you have like this solid dome, you have this ocean above the sky. The Egyptian texts are very explicit that discuss the heavenly ocean above the earth. You have it mentioned in Genesis 1, I think verse 7, the rakia being formed in the waters above it. So again, they need to be flat earthers as well, but they're not. And what I'm pointing out here is that their view of inerrancy prevents them from understanding these texts properly. They're not allowed to understand a text like the flat earth, cosmology in the Bible, or Leviathan correctly. So it's like it's like their view of the Bible is protecting them from it. They're anti-biblical in that sense. And this is the presentation that we did on cosmology in the Bible. If people are interested. Christians Wake Up. The Bible teaches a flat earth and solid heavens cosmology. Very sexy, clickable title there. Very controversial.
I tagged William Lane Craig on purpose. I was like,
never got a response.
Video. Never got. Heck no.
All right, 8 of 9. So Answers in Genesis, the whole thing, very big deal over there at the Creation Museum, is that the earth was created in 7 days, 6 days, I guess, and then rested on the 7th. And they believe this literally. They take the Bible at its word in a literal sense. They try to, they have a whole planetarium display that Jason Lyle informed them on that like tries to present a 6,000-year-old like astronomy and cosmology of the universe. And I think they totally just misunderstood the whole intent behind this text. I think that the reason why the earth was created in 7 days in Genesis is because for thousands of years in the ancient Near East, that was the inauguration period of a temple. It was the natural number to choose, and it was arbitrary, and they chose it because it was such a theologically significant idea. And this was established before Genesis 1 was written as an idea. So we have all sorts of examples, like particularly in the Bible when temples are constructed, like the tabernacle. It's constructed in 7 stages in Exodus 40. The priests were ordained in a 7-day process. There are linguistic parallels directly between this text and the Genesis creation account. And then we have things like the priests were ordered to work and keep. The priests were ordered to work and keep the tabernacle in the same, using the same verbs that God gives to Adam and Eve to work and keep the garden. Which shows, again, that creation is built as a temple in Genesis 1. Solomon's temple, its construction took 7 years. It was dedicated during a 7-day festival on the 7th month of the year. Solomon's dedication speech was delivered in 7 petitions. and then God rested in the temple after its completion. Again, temples were made to look like creation. Creation was made to look like a temple in the Bible. 7 was the natural number that you used in that context. And this goes back before biblical culture. For example, in the Baal cycle, there's a part where Baal creates his house after he destroys the chaos dragon, and it's created in a 7-day process. And then going back all the way to Sumerian culture, we have texts called the Gudea cylinders. And again, they had this 7-day dedication feast for a temple, and that temple was likened directly to creation within the text. The other point that I wanted to make is that Christians for centuries and centuries have been so like just wigging out over the weird order of creation in the Bible. Like trees are created before the sun, which is not, which doesn't make any sense. And I think the whole thing, it's actually kind of funny because like this chart that you see, you'll find it within maybe like most academic commentators on Genesis. Most of the top level guys in the commentaries that I respect, this isn't like an apologetics thing. Like scholars realize that the order of the creation is just done in a symmetrical, pretty sort of fashion. Like it was arbitrary what the order is. But the order that the scribes went with was God establishes realms of order, and then he goes and he fills those realms of order like in the same like mirrored fashion as him creating the order in the Bible. So like yeah, I think the whole like thing, like why are the days in Genesis ordered certain ways? It was just done for like literary symmetry.
Or chiasm, right? Like chiasm.
It doesn't have it doesn't have this deep like scientific intent behind it. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about in this presentation, which I think is probably one of the most significant parts of my book, Ancient Israelite Religion and Animal Death Before the Fall. The Creation Museum, young Earth creationists in general, believe that God created everything good. Death is evil. Therefore, nothing died in the original creation. And this is why in Answers in Genesis's books and their presentations, you get this picture of Tyrannosaurus Rex using his 9-inch serrated teeth to eat watermelons. That's their explanation for why some dinosaurs had long carnivorous teeth like this, is that they needed them to penetrate fruit rind. They're apparently ignorant of the fact that watermelons were domesticated by human beings fairly recently, and we can look at Renaissance paintings that show them totally different. We can look at ancient Egyptian paintings that show them like as like the size of apples. They're not aware that all the fruits that they show pretty much were domesticated by human beings in an evolutionary process. But yeah, you have claims of this in the Creation Museum. You have like dinosaurs eating pineapple looking things in the Creation Museum. It's a mess. And in this chapter of the book, I rely very heavily on a doctoral dissertation by a guy named Joshua John Van A. I've mispronounced his last name before is Van E. It's Van A. Sorry about that, Joshua. Anyways, I've read every single study I can find on this topic. I went to the library. I got a stack of books like 9 feet high and like tried to read every commentary I could on these passages that are relevant to this topic in the Bible. And this study is the best one that I've ever seen published in any language. The most thorough, the most technical. And I think it shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that ancient Northwest Semitic religion did not believe in this theological construct, this idea of a creation with no predation, without humanity killing and eating animals. That was not taught, or that wasn't an idea that ancient Judahites actually believed in. And a relevant passage that I'll bring up in order to suggest how this argument works within Vinay's dissertation. There's obviously tons of biblical texts that people cite in order to try to claim that the original creation was free of all predation. But one that I want to look at here is Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. And it reads, "And God blessed them, the man and woman, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the air, and over all the animals which move upon the earth." So God wants humanity to subdue, to kavash the animals, and to rule over them. The Hebrew here is gada. So Vene, I've checked his work on this very thoroughly. He did a study of every single time these two verbs are used in the Bible, subdue and rule, kavash and gada. And what he found is in every single case, without exception, they're used in a coercive or warlike, a very harsh manner. So my whole life as a Christian, as an evangelical, I was taught from this verse that this verse is teaching us to like be kind to nature and like to support environmentalism and everything. What's actually going on is this is like a mandate to war, to go to battle. God's telling humanity go to battle with the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and the animals, to like go to war with nature itself, and to make it more like it wasn't perfect. It needed to be subdued and ruled over, and brought into like organization and order. And so here's kavash. It occurs 13 times, and most of those times it's in war conquest texts, usually of the Israelites slaughtering, just obliterating the Canaanites, man, just giving it to them, every last man, woman, and child. That's where you'll see kavash used most frequently. It's used of enslavement, a very sexy topic in the Bible. There's a text in Micah where God tramples humanity's sins and throws them into the sea, where it's used. And then it's used in a place in Esther of someone sexually assaulting a queen. And then the verb grada, 27 occurrences, which I've gone through every single one of them with a fine-tooth comb. And again, they're very harsh terms. I'm not going to go through these, but if anyone doubts me on this, I've given a summary of every single case that they're used of enslaving, trampling enemies, and so forth. The word rada, it derives from a Hebrew term for to descend or to tread upon or to trample underfoot, like of a wine press. And these two verbs have Akkadian cognates that mean essentially pretty similar things. So we don't just have to go on the Bible for this. Every single case, they're harsh terms. They're warlike terms. This is a quote from Seth D. Postel. He's an Israeli scholar. "The militaristic overtones of the creation mandate therefore make sense only when understood as the prototypical mandate to conquer the promised land." So he's pointing out the fact that when these two terms are concatenated, they're usually, again, of the Israelite conquest of Canaan. And Genesis 1 was written around the time of the exile. It was edited around the time of the exile, brought together the traditions in it. So when ancient Judahites read Genesis 1, they would have immediately understood, like, oh, this is like the mandate to conquer Canaan. So yeah, I think they've totally misunderstood what's going on here. I think animals were noxious creatures, like they had claws and teeth, and they were fighting from the beginning, and they were at war with humanity, and humanity was at war with them. And like, how do you subdue a fish or a bird without killing it? That doesn't make sense. Like, how do you rule over a fish? What's the point? You kill it and you eat it, man. So yeah, conclusion, Mr. Ham, after careful consideration, I've decided not to endorse your park. And I guess because we've given a very provocative title to this video, I should bring it all together. As a Southern Baptist missionary kid, my whole life, my churches, my pastors, most of my professors growing up had taught me answers in Genesis' absurd worldview, or they treated young earth creationism as if it was a respectable option. And the more I fell in love with studying the Hebrew Bible, I haven't criticized the Bible at all, or the Hebrew Bible at all in this presentation. The more I fell in love with evolutionary biology, the more I came to realize that the pastors and institutions that I was raised on, they were just so uncredible. And they were really arrogant. Like, I can remember just all the times they would preach against evolution from the pulpit and like teach these views like very seriously, as if they had studied them deeply. Like, it was all fake authority, man. And realizing like the standards of verification that go in my denomination and in evangelicalism in general, like it created a crisis of faith for me where it's like I respected and looked up to all these people, and now I feel like I can't trust them on anything. They can't interpret the Bible correctly. They're not handling science correctly. And it's just like led to a crisis of faith for me. It led to me feeling extremely, extremely isolated. And like this led me down to a path of leaving Christianity ultimately. Like, thanks, Ken Ham. Thank you, Creation Museum, for triggering this terrible, like, traumatizing life experience within the course of my faith. But yeah, the book again, Misinterpreting Genesis: How the Creation Museum Misunderstands the Ancient Eastern Context of the Bible. You can find it on Amazon, and that is the presentation.
I love the that's his real body on the right, in case you're wondering. And he's competing with Joel. I can't even remember his name. Osteen, yeah. But there's not much competition there, as you can see. Make sure, if you are watching this, that you get a copy. I just posted the link to the book in the chat. It seems like Nick Sayers needs to get a copy. You know, you got a few triggered people in the chat. But seriously, get the book. Help support Ben out. This has been a fantastic presentation, Ben. I'm dead serious. I loved this presentation. It like coupled a lot of our previous presentations and like pieced it all perfectly together. And it makes sense why you question it all now. I get it. And in fact, I almost dare to say that you have a much deeper appreciation for the Bible than you ever did, now that you understand how the ancients thought about these things. Even if you think they got it wrong, I actually appreciate this book as literature much more. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It's weird. Like, the more I fell in love with the Bible and like the deeper I started to understand it, like the more isolated I felt from Christians. Like, ironically, most of them are treating the Bible as like a symbolic document. Like they're not actually interested in studying it, and they're scared to study it, because every time you study it deeply, that's a chance for your faith presuppositions to be harmed. So there's this like weird unspoken contract in churches where the pastor is going to preach from the Bible, but he's not going to get too deep. He's not going to get deep. He's not going to select texts like the test for adultery in the book of Numbers, the magic test for adultery where a woman drinks the bitter waters and like her vagina explodes or whatever. There's this contract that the pastor will never preach from scary verses like this, and that he'll only preach from like certain New Testament texts and so forth. And like, yeah, that's like this whole like weird thing in Christianity where a lot of people are terrified of studying the Bible deeply, and I wasn't. And that kind of like made people uncomfortable with me.
I relate 100%. I think that's what caused us both to end up going where we went. Because
I hear Old Testament professors say this all the time. Like, they warn people not to do a PhD if you don't want to feel lonely. Like conservative ones. Pete Enns used to say that.
Pete Enns, I think it's there's some other, people that they label themselves as Christians, but they found ways to somehow like just admit what the Bible's doing. I have a lot of respect for people like that, even if they do believe at the end of the day. It's like, okay, cool. Like, I'm not interested in making everyone not believe. That's never been my goal. My goal is to give a better understanding, because once you understand that, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that. Let's learn from that and not do those things, or even just understand our history and understanding the history of people from the Middle East. And it would help, I think, if people understood that are in political places, the piece of literature that they're dealing with that they think is so sacred that should rule us. Literally, like you said, the Hebrew word for rule. It's like that's how they it's there. It's an ugly document if you take it that way. They're trying to pacify the document by corrupting what it actually is saying and meaning. And so I really appreciate your time. There's so much, and we can tell you've done some homework.